My name is Vivian, and I'm 32 years old. I thought I had everything figured out: a successful career, a beautiful home, and a husband who I believed loved me more than anything. But people aren't always who they seem to be. 7 years of marriage, and it took just one text message for my world to crumble. James was planning to leave me for his coworker at our anniversary dinner. What he didn't know, I was one step ahead of him. Before I tell you how I turned my heartbreak into the most satisfying revenge drop, a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want more stories about women who refuse to be victims. I met James at a charity fundraiser 8 years ago. I was working as a junior marketing executive for a tech company determined to climb the corporate ladder. The event was for a children's hospital, and my firm had donated a significant amount. They sent a few of us to represent the company. James stood out immediately, tall, with dark hair, and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. We talked for hours that night, barely noticing when most of the other guests had left. "I've never met anyone like you," he told me as he asked for my number. "I feel like I've known you my whole life." Our first date was the following weekend. He took me to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a corner of the city. The place wasn't fancy, but the food was incredible. We shared a bottle of wine and talked until the staff started cleaning up around us. By the end of the night, I knew there was something special between us. The romance was a whirlwind. 6 months of dating, and James proposed on a weekend trip to the coast. He got down on one knee on the beach at sunset. It was like something out of a movie. "Vivian, you're everything I've ever wanted," he said, opening a small velvet box with a beautiful diamond ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. My sister Jessica was my maid of honor. She'd been supportive from the start, though she did think we were moving quickly. But when you know, right? After the wedding, we moved into a house in the suburbs. It wasn't exactly our dream home at first, but we spent weekends fixing it up together. James was good with his hands, and I had an eye for design. Slowly but surely, we turned it into a place we both loved. James's career as a financial advisor was taking off. He worked for Wilson and Partner, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. He was ambitious and dedicated, often working late to ensure his clients got the best service possible. At least that's what I thought at the time. We both agreed to wait on having children. We wanted to focus on our careers first, to be financially stable before bringing kids into the mix. I'd just been promoted to marketing manager, and James was building an impressive client list. We had plenty of time for a family later. One tradition we started early in our marriage was our anniversary dinner at the Skyline. It's one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, perched on the top floor of a skyscraper downtown. The food is amazing, but it's the view that makes it special. The entire city laid out below, twinkling with lights. We'd splurge every year no matter what. It was our thing. Throughout those early years, I leaned heavily on my relationship with my sister Jessica and my best friend Taylor. Jessica lived about an hour away with her husband, but we talked almost every day. Taylor and I had been friends since college, and she was always my sounding board for everything from work stress to relationship advice. From the outside looking in, James and I appeared to have the perfect marriage. We enjoyed many of the same things: hiking on weekends, trying new restaurants, binge-watching TV shows together. We traveled when we could, taking trips to Mexico, Canada, and a memorable 2 weeks in Europe for our 3rd anniversary. There was mutual respect between us, or so I believed. We supported each other's career goals and celebrated each other's wins. When I received a major promotion last year to senior marketing executive, James threw a surprise party with all our friends. And when he won Financial Advisor of the Year at his firm, I was there beaming with pride as he accepted the award. I truly believed we were happy. There were occasional arguments, of course, but nothing major. Nothing that made me question our relationship or his commitment. We were partners in every sense of the word, building a life together, brick by brick. Then, things began to change. So gradually, at first, that I barely noticed. James started working late more often. One night a week became 2, then 3. Weekend meetings became more frequent, too. "The Anderson account is huge," he'd explain, kissing me on the cheek as he headed out on a Saturday morning. "If I land this, it could mean a big bonus, maybe even a promotion." How could I argue with that? I wanted him to succeed. I was proud of his dedication. So I smiled and told him I understood, ignoring the small voice in the back of my mind that whispered something wasn't quite right. The first real sign came about 6 months before our 7th anniversary. James had always been attentive, calling or texting throughout the day, just to check in or share something funny. Those messages became less frequent. When I called him during lunch breaks, he often seemed distracted or would say he was too busy to talk. His work trips increased too. Overnight stays in neighboring cities for client meetings. A weekend conference in Chicago. A week-long training in New York. Each time our calls during these trips were brief, with James claiming exhaustion or meetings as reasons to cut them short. There were physical changes too. James had always taken care of himself, but suddenly, he was hitting the gym 5 days a week. He bought new clothes, more stylish, more expensive than what he typically wore. A new cologne replaced the one I'd given him for his birthday 2 years earlier. Our intimacy suffered. Where we once couldn't keep our hands off each other, weeks would now pass without any physical connection. When I tried to initiate, there was always an excuse. Too tired, early meeting, stress, headache. The protective behavior around his phone was what really set alarm bells ringing. James used to leave his phone lying around without a second thought. Now it was always in his pocket, and he'd take it with him even for a quick trip to the bathroom. He changed his passcode too. I noticed because he used to share it with me freely. In case of emergencies, he'd said. At first, I denied what was happening. I made excuses for him in my head. His job was stressful. The company was going through changes. He was working toward a promotion. Anything to avoid confronting the obvious possibility that my husband was pulling away from me. I tried to reconnect with him. I planned date nights, cooking his favorite meals at home with candles and wine. I suggested weekend getaways to places we'd enjoyed before. But there was always a reason we couldn't go. Work, prior commitments, not feeling well. One evening, after another canceled date night, I finally asked him directly if something was wrong. "You seem distant lately," I said carefully as we sat at the kitchen island, me with a glass of wine, him checking emails on his laptop. "Is everything okay at work with us?" His response was immediate and defensive. "What are you talking about? Everything's fine. I've just been busy. Not all of us can work 9 to 5, Vivian." The dig at my job stung. My hours were long too, and he knew it. But instead of backing down, I pressed further. "It's more than that, James. You're different. We barely talk anymore. We haven't had sex in weeks. You're always on your phone. What's going on?" He slammed his laptop shut. "Jesus, Vivian, are you keeping track, timing how often we have sex, counting my phone usage? That's pretty controlling behavior." I was stunned. James had never spoken to me like that before. And suddenly, I was the one being made to feel unreasonable, paranoid even. "I'm not trying to control you," I said, my voice smaller now. "I just miss you." His expression softened slightly, but his words remained cold. "I'm right here. I haven't gone anywhere. Maybe you need to find a hobby or something so you're not so focused on what I'm doing all the time." The conversation ended there, with nothing resolved and me feeling worse than before. Later, I called my sister Jessica and broke down on the phone. "I think something's wrong with my marriage," I sobbed. "James is so distant, and when I try to talk to him about it, he makes me feel crazy." Jessica, ever the pragmatist, tried to calm me down. "Men go through phases, Viv. Remember when Mike was obsessed with that fantasy football league? I barely saw him for 3 months. Maybe James is just going through something at work. Have you asked about that specifically? He just says everything's fine. Then maybe it is, she suggested. Don't create problems where there aren't any. You've always been the overthinker in the family. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I was overreacting, that this was just a phase we'd get through. So I tried to put my concerns aside and give James space. Then came the day I decided to surprise him at work. It was a Friday, and I had taken the afternoon off for a dentist appointment that finished earlier than expected. On impulse, I picked up lunch from his favorite deli and headed to his office. The receptionist knew me and waved me through with a smile. I made my way to James's office, lunch bags in hand, excited to see his face when I walked in. But his office was empty. I stood there confused until a woman's voice behind me asked, "Are you looking for James?" I turned to find a woman I vaguely recognized staring at me. She was tall and slim with long blonde hair. It took me a moment to place her. Amanda, one of James's colleagues. I'd met her briefly at the company Christmas party the year before. "Yes, I brought him lunch," I explained, holding up the bags. "Do you know where he is?" Something flickered across her face. Surprise, discomfort. It was gone before I could identify it. "He's in a meeting with clients," she said. "But it should be wrapping up soon. Conference room B." I thanked her and turned to head that way when she added, "I didn't realize you and James did lunch dates. He usually eats with the team." The way she said it, with familiarity, almost possessively, made my stomach clench. Before I could respond, James appeared in the hallway. He stopped short when he saw me. His expression a mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite read. "Vivian, what are you doing here?" The question came out sharper than appropriate for a husband seeing his wife. I held up the lunch bags, suddenly feeling foolish. "Surprise. My appointment ended early, so I thought we could have lunch together." James glanced at Amanda, then back to me. That's thoughtful, but I've got back-to-back meetings today. There's the Peterson account review in 5 minutes. I can leave it for you to eat later," I suggested, trying to salvage the moment. "Why don't you join us for lunch downstairs, Vivian?" Amanda offered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A bunch of us are heading out. James usually comes." James shot Amanda a look I couldn't interpret. "Not today. Like I said, meetings." The tension between them was palpable. I stood there, lunch bags in hand, feeling like an intruder in my husband's world. "No problem," I said, finally setting the bags on his desk. "I'll see you at home tonight." James walked me to the elevator, his hand on my lower back in a show of affection that felt performative. "Sorry about that. It's just a crazy day." "It's fine," I lied. "Amanda seems friendly." "She's just a colleague," he replied too quickly. "Part of my team on some projects." The elevator arrived, and I stepped in, turning to face him. "I'll see you at home. Don't work too late." As the doors closed, the last thing I saw was James looking back toward his office, toward Amanda, with an anxious expression. I left the building with a sick, heavy feeling in my stomach, the kind of intuitive dread that comes when you know something is terribly wrong but aren't ready to admit it yet. On the drive home, I replayed the interaction in my mind. The way Amanda spoke about James, her surprise at my appearance, the silent communication between them. I'd been ignoring the signs for months, but I couldn't ignore them anymore. Something was happening between my husband and Amanda. I just didn't have proof yet. By the time I got home, I had made a decision. I would pay attention, really pay attention, to all the signs I'd been trying to ignore. No more making excuses for James. No more convincing myself I was paranoid. If something was happening, I needed to know the truth no matter how painful it might be. The evidence appeared 3 weeks later. James had gone for a morning run, leaving his jacket draped over the kitchen chair. As I moved it to hang it up, a folded piece of paper fell from the pocket. I wouldn't normally have looked, but after the office encounter, my suspicions were on high alert. It was a receipt from the Grand Hotel downtown. Lunch for two in their exclusive restaurant charged to James's personal credit card, not his company card. The date was a Tuesday 2 weeks earlier, a day he'd told me he had client meetings across town. I stood in the kitchen, receipt in hand, heart pounding. This wasn't definitive proof of anything. Colleagues have lunch, business is discussed. But why lie about the location? Why use his personal card? My mind raced with possibilities. I could confront him directly, wave the receipt in his face, and demand answers. But if there was an innocent explanation, I'd look like the paranoid, distrustful wife he'd already accused me of being. And if there wasn't an innocent explanation, I needed more information before confronting him. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into our phone account online. James and I shared a family plan, and I had access to the detailed call logs. What I found made me physically ill. Dozens of calls and texts to the same number, many late at night or early morning times when James had told me he was working or at the gym. The number wasn't saved in the system under a name, but the pattern was clear. Regular communication, often for long durations, at times when spouses shouldn't be having lengthy calls with anyone but each other. I wrote down the number, my hand shaking. I didn't call it. I wasn't ready to hear another woman's voice answer. Instead, I waited for my next opportunity. It came 2 days later. James was taking a shower, and his iPad was on the coffee table. He'd always kept it password protected, but we used the same passwords for most of our accounts early in our marriage. I tried an old one on the hunch, and it worked. My hands trembled as I opened his messages. There it was. Conversations with Amanda going back 5 months. I scrolled through them, each message driving the knife deeper into my heart. Miss you already. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Meeting clients again? When are you going to tell her I'm tired of being the other woman? Soon, I promise. I'm waiting for the right moment. Anniversary dinner at the Skyline would be poetic, don't you think? I kept reading, unable to stop despite the pain exploding in my chest. What if she makes a scene? Amanda had asked. She won't, James replied. Vivian hates public displays. She'll keep it together until we're home, then cry in the bathroom like she always does. By then, I'll have my stuff packed. Clean break. He knew me so well, knew exactly how I would react. Had calculated it into his plan to leave me with minimal inconvenience to himself. More scrolling revealed discussions of their future together. Moving in. Perhaps marriage eventually. How much happier he was with Amanda than he'd ever been with me. The final blow came in a message from just 2 days earlier. Got reservations at the Skyline for our table. Right after I break the news to V, you can join us for a drink. Time for you two to officially meet. He was planning to have his affair partner join us at our anniversary dinner, right after telling me our marriage was over. The humiliation he had planned was breathtaking in its cruelty. I heard the shower turn off and quickly closed the messages, putting the iPad back exactly as I'd found it. I made it to our bedroom, closed the door, and slid down to the floor, a hand clamped over my mouth to stifle the sobs that racked my body. 7 years. 7 years of what I thought was a good marriage, reduced to clinical discussions of how to discard me with minimal fuss. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Physical, visceral, as if something inside me was being torn apart. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I dragged myself to the bed when I heard James moving around downstairs. I sent a quick text to my sister. Need you. Emergency. Can you come over when Jay leaves? Jessica arrived 30 minutes after James left for a meeting. One look at my face, and she knew something was terribly wrong. What happened? Are you sick? She asked, rushing to my side. I couldn't speak at first, just handed her my phone with the screenshots I'd taken of the messages. I watched her expression change from concern to shock to fury as she scrolled through them. That son of a bitch, she whispered. Viv, I'm so sorry. The tears came again, and Jessica held me as I cried. She let me get it all out, all the pain and betrayal and humiliation. When the worst of the storm had passed, she pushed a glass of water into my hands. Drink. Then we need to talk about what you're going to do. I don't know, I admitted. Confront him, leave. Wait until he tells me at dinner, and then fall apart like he expects. Jessica's eyes hardened. No, you're not giving him the satisfaction of seeing you broken. Men like James count on their wives being too devastated to think clearly. But you're going to be smarter than that. She was right. Falling apart wouldn't help me. James had been calculating in his betrayal. I needed to be strategic in my response. First thing tomorrow, you're meeting with a divorce attorney, Jessica insisted. Before you confront him, before he knows that you know you need to understand your legal position. I nodded, a strange calm beginning to replace the initial shock. I'll need to gather financial information too. If he's been planning this for months, who knows what he's done with our money? Over the next 2 days, I maintained a perfect facade. I smiled at James, asked about his day, pretended everything was normal while secretly downloading bank statements and making copies of important documents. I found evidence that James had indeed been moving money, small amounts at first, then larger transfers, to an account I didn't recognize. 3 days after discovering the affair, I met with Susan Blackwell, one of the top divorce attorneys in the city. She listened attentively as I laid out what I knew, occasionally making notes. I have a prenuptial agreement, I told her, sliding the document across her desk. I'm not sure what it means for me now. Susan reviewed it carefully, then looked up with the first piece of good news I'd had in days. This is actually quite favorable to you in case of infidelity. There's a clause here that significantly increases your settlement if the marriage ends due to proven adultery. For the first time since finding those messages, I felt a flicker of something other than despair, a small sense of justice potentially within reach. Gather as much evidence as you can, Susan advised. The text messages are a good start, but anything else you can document will strengthen your position. And whatever you do, don't move out of the house, don't drain joint accounts, and don't do anything that could be construed as abandonment or financial misconduct. I left her office with a plan taking shape in my mind. I would let the anniversary dinner happen. I would let James think he was in control of the situation. But I wouldn't be the sobbing, helpless wife he expected. No, I had something much better in mind. Our 7th anniversary was 3 days away. I had very little time to set my plan in motion, but I was determined to make it work. The first step was calling the Skyline and asking to speak with the manager. This is Marcel Dupont, a French-accented voice answered. How may I help you? Hello, Marcel. My name is Vivian Collins. My husband James and I have a reservation for Saturday night. It's our anniversary. Yes, Mrs. Collins. I see the reservation here. A special night indeed. Is there something specific you require? Champagne, perhaps? Actually, I said, taking a deep breath, I'm calling about a rather unusual situation. I explained everything to Marcel. The affair, James's plan to tell me at dinner, even his intention to have Amanda join us afterward. I didn't know how Marcel would react, but I needed an ally if my plan was to work. There was a long pause after I finished speaking. Then, to my surprise, Marcel's tone softened considerably. Mrs. Collins, I understand completely. 3 years ago, my wife of 12 years left me for my brother's best friend. I know the pain of such betrayal. Relief flooded through me. So you'll help me? But of course. The Skyline prides itself on creating memorable experiences for our guests. This will certainly be memorable. Marcel and I spent the next 20 minutes working out the details. He confirmed what I'd already suspected. James had indeed requested their best table and ordered champagne to be brought out after the main course. He'd also left special instructions for a server to watch for his signal, at which point a second table setting would be prepared for Amanda to join us. What James didn't know was that I had information he thought was private. While going through his emails, I'd discovered that he had bought Amanda an expensive handbag for her birthday last month, charging it to her credit card to avoid suspicion, but promising to pay her back. Her card details were still in his email confirmation. "Is it possible," I asked Marcel, "to arrange for our entire bill to be charged to this card?" Marcel chuckled. "Consider it done, Mrs. Collins. Your husband will order as men typically do at the Skyline. The bill will come to him as expected, but when he provides payment, my staff will inform him the bill has already been arranged to be charged to Ms. Amanda Lewis's card. I'll personally handle that moment." With the restaurant arrangements in place, I focused on my own preparation. I bought a new dress, a stunning red number that I knew would draw attention. I had my hair and makeup done professionally, opting for a sophisticated look that projected confidence rather than vulnerability. I practiced my reactions in the mirror. The surprise when James delivered his news, the dignified response, the calm revelation that I already knew everything. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. The night before our anniversary, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying scenarios, imagining James's face when he realized I wasn't following his script. By morning, I felt strangely calm. The initial shock and pain had dulled, somewhat replaced by a steely determination to maintain my dignity and perhaps exact a small measure of justice for the humiliation he had planned for me. As I dressed for dinner on our anniversary, I looked at myself in the mirror. "You are stronger than he knows," I told my reflection. And tonight, he's going to find that out. The Skyline occupied the entire top floor of the Archer Building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the city. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white-clothed tables spaced far enough apart to ensure private conversations. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. James and I had always driven to the Skyline together for our anniversary dinners, but this year, I'd made an excuse about a late meeting and arranged to meet him there. I wanted to make my entrance alone on my terms. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Collins, welcome. Your husband has already arrived. Marcel mentioned you might like a moment before being seated." I nodded gratefully. "Just a minute to compose myself." I took a deep breath, checked my reflection once more in the mirrored wall, and then gave him a nod. "I'm ready now." James stood as I approached our table by the window. He looked handsome in his dark suit, his smile betraying nothing of what he planned to do later. For a moment, seeing him like this, like the man I'd fallen in love with, made my heart ache with what we'd once had, or what I thought we'd had. "You look beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His cologne, the new one, the one I hadn't given him, filled my nostrils. "Thank you," I replied, taking my seat as the waiter held out my chair. "Happy anniversary." James raised his water glass. 7 years. Who would have thought? Indeed, who would have thought it would end like this? Our waiter Lorenzo appeared at the table. Marcel had mentioned he would be serving us and was fully briefed on the situation. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Collins. It's wonderful to have you with us on your special night." Lorenzo's professionalism was impeccable. There wasn't even a hint that he knew what was about to unfold. "May I start you with something from the bar?" James ordered an expensive bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, not bothering to consult me about my preferences. It was the first of many expensive choices he would make that evening, secure in the knowledge he wouldn't be paying the bill himself. As Lorenzo left to get our wine, I glanced around the restaurant, wondering if Amanda was already here. My scan of the room was rewarded when I spotted her at a small table near the bar, pretending to be engrossed in the menu, while occasionally glancing our way. She wore a black dress that hugged her figure, her blonde hair falling in waves past her shoulders. I looked away before James could notice me looking. This wasn't the time. Not yet. The meal progressed through multiple courses, appetizers of seared scallops for me and foie gras for James, a palate-cleansing sorbet, Entrees of filet mignon for him and sea bass for me. James ordered a second bottle of wine plus specialty cocktails. Money was clearly no object tonight. Throughout the meal, we maintained the pretense of a normal anniversary dinner. James asked about my work. I inquired about his clients. We reminisced about previous anniversaries, the irony of this not lost on me. All the while, I was achingly aware of Amanda's presence across the restaurant, waiting for her cue. James became increasingly fidgety as the meal progressed. He checked his watch. His eyes occasionally darted to where Amanda sat. He drank more than usual, perhaps needing liquid courage for what he planned to do. As our plates were cleared after the main course, Lorenzo appeared with a bottle of champagne we hadn't ordered. "Compliments of the house for your special evening," he announced expertly, uncorking the bottle and filling 2 flutes. James shifted in his seat, recognizing his cue. He reached across the table and took my hand in his. His palm was sweaty. "Vivian, there's something I need to tell you." I looked into his eyes, seeing not the man I'd married, but a stranger who had been meticulously planning to break my heart in the cruelest way possible. Still, I played my part. "What is it, James?" He took a deep breath. "This isn't easy to say, especially tonight, but I believe in honesty. I've realized over the past year that we've been growing apart. We want different things. We've become different people." I remained silent, letting him continue his rehearsed speech. "I'll always care about you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." He glanced down at our joined hands, then back up. "I've found someone else, someone who understands me in ways you never could. I'm leaving you, Vivian." I pulled my hand away slowly. "I see." My calm response clearly wasn't what he expected. He frowned slightly before continuing. "Her name is Amanda. She's special. I think you'd actually like her if you got to know her. In fact, she's here tonight. I thought it might be good for you two to meet, to see that this isn't just some fling." The audacity of his suggestion nearly broke my composure, but I maintained my calm exterior. "You want me to meet your mistress on our anniversary night?" James winced at the word mistress, but pushed forward. "It doesn't have to be ugly, Vivian. We can be adults about this. Amanda is waiting to join us for a drink." I nodded thoughtfully. How considerate of her to be here for our anniversary. James seemed relieved by my apparent acceptance. "I've already started moving some things to her place. I'll come by tomorrow to get the rest while you're at work. I think that would be easier for both of us." "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" I said, my voice steady. James smiled, clearly believing this was going as planned. "I just want to make this as painless as possible." "That's very thoughtful," I replied. "Should we have that drink with Amanda now? I'm sure she's tired of waiting." James looked surprised, but pleased. "Yes, let me just get her." As he stood, I added, "Before you go, perhaps we should settle the bill. I imagine you'll want to leave directly from here." "Right, yes." He signaled to Lorenzo, who approached with the leather folder containing our check. James opened it, his eyebrows raising slightly at the total. Just over $600. He pulled out his credit card and handed it to Lorenzo. "Actually, sir," Lorenzo said smoothly, "the bill has already been arranged to be charged to another card." James frowned. "What? No, that's not possible. I didn't arrange anything." "It's the card belonging to Ms. Amanda Lewis, sir. The charge has already been processed." James stared at Lorenzo, then at me, his face a mask of confusion. "What? How?" I smiled serenely. "You should ask Amanda to pay for this dinner, James. After all, she's been enjoying the benefits of our marriage for months now." His face drained of color as understanding dawned. "You know." "I know everything." I confirmed, my voice low but steady. "The hotel lunches, The late-night calls, the money you've been moving to a separate account, your plans to leave me tonight and have her join us for a drink afterward. I know that you've been discussing how pathetic I'd be crying in the bathroom while you pack your things. James's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. He looked like he might be sick. At that moment, Amanda appeared beside our table, her expression confused. James, is everything okay? The waiter just told me my card was used for your dinner. I turned to her with a pleasant smile. Hello, Amanda. I'm Vivian, James's wife. Well, soon-to-be ex-wife, apparently. James was just telling me how special you are, how you understand him in ways I never could. Amanda looked between us, clearly not prepared for this scenario. I don't understand. James told me you knew about us, that your marriage was practically over. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Did he? How interesting. No, Amanda, I didn't know until 3 days ago when I found your texts on his iPad. The ones where you plan how he'll break the news to me tonight, where you discuss moving in together, where you call yourself the other woman. Those texts. Amanda's face flushed red. She turned to James. You said she knew. You said she didn't care anymore, that you were basically separated. James stood frozen, looking from Amanda to me, his carefully constructed plan collapsing around him. The nearby tables had gone quiet diners, pretending not to watch the drama unfolding. I have one more surprise, I said, reaching into my clutch and pulling out a manila envelope. These are divorce papers, James. My lawyer drew them up. You'll find the terms quite interesting, especially the part about the infidelity clause in our prenup. I stood, placing the envelope on the table. I've already moved your things to the guest room. You can stay there until you find a place. Unless, of course, Amanda's ready for you to move in. Amanda backed away, shaking her head. No way. This isn't what you promised, James. I'm not getting in the middle of this mess. I grabbed my clutch, preparing to leave. Oh, and James, I've already changed the passwords to all our accounts. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest. By now, several tables of diners were openly watching. James stood there, his face ashen, his perfect plan in ruins. The powerful financial advisor reduced to a stuttering mess. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at them. Enjoy the rest of your evening. The champagne is excellent. With that, I walked through the restaurant, head held high, past the curious stares and whispers. Marcel caught my eye as I passed the host stand and gave me a subtle nod of approval. I smiled in return, a genuine smile for the first time that evening. It wasn't until I was in the taxi heading to Jessica's apartment that I finally allowed the tears to fall. Not tears of humiliation or defeat, but a complex mixture of grief for what I'd lost, relief that it was over, and pride that I'd found the strength to face my husband's betrayal on my terms, not his. The aftermath was as messy as one might expect. I spent that night at Jessica's apartment, finally allowing myself to break down completely once I was safely away from James and the restaurant. She held me as I cried, assuring me I'd done the right thing, that I'd been stronger than most would have been in my situation. By morning, I had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages from James. They ranged from angry, "How dare you humiliate me like that?" to desperate, "Please talk to me," to manipulative, "This is why our marriage failed. You're so vindictive." I didn't respond to any of them. Amanda had her own reckoning to face. According to office gossip that reached me through mutual connections, she discovered that James had lied about many things, not just the state of our marriage. He'd told her I was cold and unloving, focused only on my career. He'd claimed we hadn't been intimate in over a year, that we'd discussed separation multiple times. None of it was true. When I returned home the next day, James was waiting. He'd clearly been drinking, his eyes red-rimmed from alcohol or tears or both. "We need to talk about this like adults," he insisted, following me from room to room as I pointedly ignored him. "What happened at the restaurant was completely unnecessary. You made a fool of both of us." I finally turned to face him. "No, James. You made a fool of yourself. I just refused to play the role you assigned me. Is this about the money? He demanded. Because we can work something out. The prenup is bullshit anyway. No court will uphold those terms. I smiled coldly. My lawyer disagrees, but we'll let the courts decide that. James's demeanor changed then, becoming pleading. Vivian, please. I made a mistake. Amanda means nothing to me. It was just a fling that got out of hand. A 5-month fling, where you discussed moving in together and eventually marriage, where you systematically moved our money into separate accounts, where you planned to humiliate me on our anniversary, that kind of fling. His face crumpled. I'll end it with her. Today. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. It was almost laughable, this sudden desire to save our marriage now that he realized the financial consequences of his actions. The infidelity clause in our prenup meant he stood to lose significantly more than he would in a normal divorce settlement. It's too late, James. The locks will be changed tomorrow. You can stay in the guest room tonight, but after that you'll need to find somewhere else to live. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly after that. James initially tried to contest the prenup, claiming I had tricked him into signing it or that he hadn't understood the terms. His lawyer eventually convinced him that such arguments rarely succeed, especially given the clear evidence of his affair. Meanwhile, there were professional consequences for both James and Amanda. While office romances weren't explicitly forbidden at their firm, relationships between employees at different levels were strongly discouraged. James was Amanda's direct supervisor, which complicated matters further. Someone, not me, sent copies of some of their text messages to the HR department. An internal investigation was launched. By the time it concluded, Amanda had already found another job, and James was placed on probation, his chances for partnership effectively destroyed. James lost friends in the aftermath, too. Many of our mutual acquaintances were shocked by his behavior. Men who had golfed with him weekly suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Couples who had dined at our home found reasons to decline his invitations. For me, the emotional journey was complex and difficult. Some days, I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by grief for the marriage I thought I had. Other days, anger fueled me, giving me energy to work with my lawyer, document financial information, and push the divorce forward. I leaned heavily on Jessica and my friend Taylor during this time. They took turns staying with me on the hardest days, making sure I ate, encouraging me to keep moving forward. Throughout it all, James made repeated attempts to reconcile. Flowers delivered to my office, tearful phone calls, even an awkward appearance at Jessica's house one night when he knew I was having dinner there. I made the biggest mistake of my life, he told me, his voice breaking. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, Vivian, give me another chance. But the James I had loved was gone. Or perhaps had never existed at all. The man standing before me had meticulously planned to break my heart in the cruelest way possible. Had discussed with his mistress how pathetic I would be. Had moved our money in preparation for leaving me. No, I said simply. It's over, James. 3 months after our anniversary dinner, we met in our lawyer's offices to sign the final divorce papers. The settlement was heavily in my favor thanks to the infidelity clause and James's attempts to hide assets. I would keep the house and receive a significant financial settlement. James would keep his retirement accounts and his car. As I signed the last document, a strange mix of sadness and relief washed over me. 7 years of marriage reduced to signatures on legal papers, but also the official end to months of pain and betrayal. The start of something new. James tried one last time as we left the building. Vivian, wait, please. We can tear these up, start over. I still love you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a distant pity. Goodbye, James. I walked to my car without looking back, the signed papers in my bag and the future uncertain but mine alone stretching out before me. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the empty living room of what had been our home, now sold to a young couple expecting their first child. The furniture had been moved out the day before, leaving only echoes and memories. The first months after the divorce had been harder than I'd expected. Despite James's betrayal, despite the clarity that ending the marriage was the right decision, I struggled with my new identity. For 7 years, I had been part of a couple half of James and Vivian. Now I was just Vivian again, and sometimes I wasn't entirely sure who that was. I had kept the house initially thinking it would provide stability during the transition. But as weeks passed, I realized the space held too many memories, both good and painful. Every room reminded me of our life together, of the future I had planned, now evaporated. With Jessica's encouragement, I put the house on the market. It sold quickly, and I found a bright modern apartment downtown, closer to my office and to the vibrancy of the city. A fresh start in a place without ghosts. Therapy had been Jessica's idea too. "You need to process this properly," she insisted, "not just push it down and move on." She was right. My weekly sessions with Dr. Marshall helped me work through the complicated grief of losing not just my marriage, but the future I had imagined. We talked about trust, about red flags I had ignored, about building a new life not defined by James's betrayal. "Betrayal trauma is real," Dr. Marshall explained during one session. "It's not just emotional pain. It affects your ability to trust your sense of safety in the world, even your identity. Healing takes time and intention." Time and intention. I focused on both, gradually rebuilding myself. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my marriage. I joined a book club. I took cooking classes, something I'd always wanted to do, but James had dismissed as unnecessary. One of the most healing things I did was start a support group for women going through divorce. It began informally, just me, Taylor, who had divorced 2 years earlier, and 2 other women from my office building meeting for coffee and conversation. It grew into a bi-weekly gathering of 8 to 10 women, sharing experiences, advice, and encouragement. Professionally, I continued to thrive. The focus I'd put into my work during the worst days of the divorce paid off with another promotion. I now headed the entire marketing department, managing a team of 12. The increased responsibilities and salary came at the perfect time, giving me both distraction and financial security as I rebuilt my life. 4 months after the divorce, I decided to take a trip I had always wanted to experience. 2 weeks in Italy. James and I had talked about going for years, always putting it off for someday. I decided that someday was now. I traveled alone, visiting Rome, Florence, Venice, and the Amalfi Coast. The trip was challenging at times, navigating foreign cities alone, dining solo in romantic restaurants, dealing with the occasional unwanted attention from men who viewed a woman traveling alone as an invitation. But it was also incredibly freeing. I made my own itinerary, changed plans on a whim, met interesting people from around the world, and reconnected with a sense of adventure I had forgotten I possessed. In Florence, I stood before Botticelli's Birth of Venus at the Uffizi Gallery, moved to unexpected tears by its beauty. A woman next to me offered a tissue. "It affects everyone differently," she said with a smile. For me, it was the Pietà in Rome. Her name was Eleanor, a 60-something widow from Chicago, on her own solo journey. We ended up having dinner together, where she shared her story of rebuilding life after loss. "The worst mistake we can make," she told me over pasta and wine, "is thinking our story is over just because one chapter ended badly. There are so many pages yet to be written." I carried those words back with me to the States, a reminder that my life was still unfolding, still full of possibilities. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into James at a mutual friend's engagement party. I had known he might be there, but decided not to let that stop me from celebrating Mark and Diana's happiness. James looked different, thinner, less polished somehow. He approached me cautiously at the bar. "You look well," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you. How have you been?" He shrugged. "Managing. Started at a new firm last month. Smaller but good people." I nodded, realizing with some surprise that I felt no anger looking at him, just a vague sadness for what might have been, and a certain relief that it wasn't. "Are you seeing anyone?" he asked, then quickly added, "Sorry, not my business." "It's fine," I assured him. "And yes, I've started dating again casually." This was true. At Jessica's insistence, I had created a profile on a dating app 2 months earlier. Most of the matches had been forgettable, but there had been a few pleasant evenings enough to remind me that connection was still possible. James nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Vivian." We chatted for a few more minutes about neutral topics: mutual friends, the neighborhood, the unseasonably warm weather. Then I excused myself to join Jessica across the room. As I walked away, I realized something important. James no longer had power over my emotions. The sight of him didn't trigger pain or anger or longing. He was just someone I used to know. That night marked a turning point. I began to feel truly free from the past, ready to embrace whatever came next. One of the men I'd met through the dating app was Michael, a landscape architect who had been divorced for 3 years. Unlike the others who seemed eager to establish a romantic connection immediately, Michael suggested friendship first. "We're both healing from something significant," he said during our second meeting. "Maybe we could just enjoy each other's company without expectations for a while." His honesty was refreshing, and over the following weeks, we developed a genuine friendship. We went hiking, attended jazz concerts, explored new restaurants. We talked about our failed marriages, our professional challenges, our hopes for the future. There was attraction there, but we let it simmer, building a foundation of trust before exploring anything more. As I approached the 1-year mark of discovering James's affair, I realized how much had changed both in my circumstances and in myself. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I suspected there would always be a scar, but it no longer dominated my life. I had reclaimed my sense of self stronger now for having been tested. I thought often of the night at the skyline of the strength I'd found to face James's betrayal on my terms, rather than his. That moment of refusing to be a victim had been the first step toward healing, toward reclaiming my power and my future. Jessica announced her pregnancy that fall, bringing new joy to our family. The thought of becoming an aunt, of welcoming a new life, and watching it grow filled me with a sense of continuity and hope that had been missing. On the anniversary of my divorce finalization, my support group surprised me with a celebration at my favorite restaurant. Not a celebration of the marriage's end, but of my resilience and new beginning. "To Vivian," Taylor toasted, raising her glass, "who showed us all what strength really looks like." As I looked around at these women, some still raw in their pain, others further along in their healing, I felt profound gratitude for the community that had emerged from my darkest time. We had all been broken in different ways, but in sharing our stories, in supporting each other's journeys, we had found a path toward wholeness. Later that night, alone in my apartment with a final glass of wine, I thought about the lessons of the past year. I had learned that betrayal doesn't define you unless you let it. That endings, however painful, make space for new beginnings. That there is strength in vulnerability, in asking for help, in letting others witness your pain and your healing. Most importantly, I had learned that I was enough, on my own, without a partner, without the identity of wife. I was whole and complete, capable of building a life that reflected my values, my desires, my authentic self. The future remained unwritten. Perhaps Michael and I would eventually explore the romantic connection that simmered beneath our friendship. Perhaps I would meet someone entirely new, or choose to remain single. Perhaps my career would take me to new cities, new challenges, new heights. Whatever came next, I knew I would face it with the hard-won wisdom of someone who had survived heartbreak and emerged stronger. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Because pain, when we don't run from it, has much to teach us about resilience, about compassion, about our capacity to begin again. If you've ever faced betrayal or had to rebuild your life after a relationship ended, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find the strength to move forward? What helped you heal? And if you're still in the middle of that journey, know that you're not alone. Like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in our most vulnerable moments. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a much better story.